Bantam Doubleday Dell Audio Publishing presents The Cutout by Francine Mathews. Part 1, Tuesday, November 9. Berlin, 12:03 p.m. She was a small woman. The press had always made much of that. On this crisp November morning, in the last days of a bloody century, she stood tiptoe on a platform designed to lift her within sight of the crowd. They were a polyglot mass: threadbare German students, Central Europeans, a smattering of American tourists, turbaned Turks holding blood-red placards, all shadowed, of course, by the ubiquitous security detail of the new regime. After 24 hours in Berlin, Sophie Payne had grown accustomed to the presence of riot police. The international press corps jostled her audience freely, cameras held high like religious icons. The new German chancellor had not yet banned the media. Just across Pariser Platz, at the foot of the Brandenburg Gate, sat a tangle of television vans and satellite dishes. Sophie surveyed them from her podium and understood that she was making history. The first American vice president to descend upon the new German capital of Berlin, she had appeared at a troubled time. The people gathered in the square expected her to deliver an American message, the promise of solidarity in struggle, or perhaps redemption. But in the last 36 hours, Sophie had read the obscene graffiti scrawled on the new Holocaust memorial. She had met with third-generation Turkish guest workers, Gastarbeiters, about to be repatriated to a country they had never seen. She had even dined with the new Chancellor Fritz Werkel, and applauded politely when he spoke of the rebirth of German greatness. Then she had lain sleepless far into the night, remembering her parents, and decided that a statement must be made. Now she set aside her carefully crafted speech and adjusted the mic. "Meine Damen und Herren," she began, "we come here today to celebrate a new embassy for a new century. But the fact that we do so in the city of Berlin is worthy of particular attention," she continued. "The capital of Germany's past as well as her future, Berlin, can never be wholly reborn. It carries its history in every stone of its streets, for Berlin witnessed Hitler's tyranny and horror, and Berlin paid for its sins in blood. As we dedicate this embassy, let us commit ourselves to one proposition, that never again will this nation submit to dictatorship. Never again will it shut its doors to any race. Berlin must be the capital for all Germany's people." There was a tremendous roar, spontaneous, uplifting, and utterly foolhardy, from the crowd in the middle of Pariser Platz. A turbaned figure waved his placard and began chanting in a torrent of Turkish. He was followed by others scattered throughout the square, and in an instant the police truncheons descended in a savage arc. Someone screamed. Sophie took a step back from the podium. She saw a woman crumple under the feet of the crowd. Nell Forsyte, Sophie's Secret Service agent, was instantly at her side. "Say thank you and get out," Nell muttered. Sophie reached for the microphone as the screaming began, a thin, high shriek piercing the chaos. A wave of red light boiled toward the podium where she stood, paralyzed. She thought, "Good God, it's a bomb. Did I do that?" Suddenly, Nell Forsyte flung Sophie to the platform like a rag doll and lay heavily on her back, a human shield. For an instant, Sophie breathed outside of time. "You okay?" Nell demanded hoarsely in her ear. Sophie nodded, and her forehead struck the wooden platform. "Get off my back, Nell, you're killing me." The Secret Service agent ignored her, but Sophie felt a slight shifting in the woman's weight. Nell was craning her neck to scan the square. Sophie had a momentary vision of a pile of dignitaries, American, German, all crushed beneath their respective security details. If I could just get up, I'd feel more in control. She dug an elbow into Nell's ribs. The agent grunted. "When I count to 3, stand up and face the embassy. I'll cover your back." "Shouldn't we crawl?" "Too much glass," Nell said. At the right side of the platform, maybe a yard from where she stood, A dark-skinned, turbaned figure drew a machine gun from his coat and aimed it at Sophie. She stared at him, fascinated. Then Nell's pistol popped and the man's left eye welled crimson. He reeled like a drunk, his gun discharging in the air. This time, Nell tackled her at the knees. The medevac helicopter circled over Pariser Platz twice, ignoring the frantic signal of an ambulance crew from the rubble below. Then the chopper pilot veered sharply left and hovered over the roof of the embassy. Normally, a Marine Guard would have been posted there for the duration of the Vice President's speech, but after the explosion the roof was empty. The pilot found the bullseye of the landing pad and set down the craft. A two-man team scuttled out of the chopper, backs bent under the wind of the blades. They rolled a white-sheeted gurney between them. A third man, blonde-haired, black-jacketed, crouched in the craft's open doorway. He covered the team with an automatic rifle until they reached the rooftop door. There, one of the men drew a snub-nosed submachine gun from his white lab coat and fired at the communications antennae bolted to the embassy roof. Then he blew the lock off the door. A security alarm blared immediately. It was drowned in the clamor of Pariser Platz. The blonde-haired man raised his gun and glanced over his shoulder at the helicopter pilot. "They're in. Give 'em 3 minutes." Machine gun fire. It was the sound of her recurring nightmare, a dream about execution and a firing squad. Sophie struggled in Nell's grip, choking on the wave of oily smoke that had flooded Pariser Platz. The agent lifted her under the armpits like a child. "We've got to get inside the embassy." A Marine Guard thrust open the shattered main door. Then he fell, slack-mouthed and startled, dead at Sophie's feet. Nell's arm came up beside her. The agent fired at something in the shadows of the entryway, and then, with a sound like a punctured tire, Nell dropped to her knees. There had been no report from another gun. Someone inside the embassy had a silencer. A clatter of footsteps, a gurney being lifted over the Marine Guard's corpse. Blood was spreading rapidly across the dark blue wool of Nell's suit. A rescue team in white coats surged towards Sophie, and she sank down beside the agent with a feeling of relief. Nell grabbed Sophie's waist with one arm and with the other raised her gun. As Sophie watched, a bullet struck the agent square in the forehead and she slumped over, rage still blazing in her eyes. Sophie was cradling her, a dragging, bleeding weight, and screaming, "Nell! Nell!" when they seized her from behind. Then night fell like the guttering of a candle flame. "Get out of the way!" the man at the head of the gurney shouted in German to the bewildered survivors at the edge of the platform. "We need room! Move it!" The medevac helicopter hovered 200 yards above Pariser Platz, a gurney line descending from the motorized reel. It took only seconds for the 2 men below to attach the stretcher. It rose slowly, smoothly, with its white-sheeted burden. A figure appeared through the swirling maelstrom of smoke, black leather jacket, blonde head. He reached for the stretcher, steadied it, and swung it carefully inside. Arlington, 7 a.m. In the kitchen of her house in Arlington, Caroline Carmichael balanced her coffee cup, an oversized piece of Italian pottery with De Ruta stamped on the bottom, between the thumb and forefinger of each hand. In some hollow of her mind she was determining which suit to wear to work, but for the moment she was content to sit nude beneath her oversized terry-cloth robe. It enfolded her like an ermine, a second skin. It had once belonged to Eric, and that alone made it precious. She closed her eyes and imagined him breathing. She had bought the robe for him in a shop in Cyprus, Nicosia. He had worn it maybe 4 times. "I'm not a robe kind of guy," he'd told her when she packed for the States. "Take it with you, really." She remembered that his eyes had been fixed on nothing when he said this. Caroline never asked where his mind went in such moments. She was too well acquainted with Eric's demons, the fear that gripped him before certain meetings, the uncontrolled retching over the porcelain bowl. Nicosia was bad. Budapest was worse. She could have loved the craggy old Hungarian city on the banks of the Danube were it not for the change in Eric. Some nights, working surveillance in the passenger...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?